Have you ever felt it? That quiet hum beneath the surface of your days, a persistent whisper suggesting that, despite all your efforts, all the motion and activity, you're fundamentally adrift. You might surround yourself with tasks, with people, with ambitions and duties, a carefully constructed life designed to signify purpose. Yet, in the stillness, when the noise subsides, there is an undeniable ache, a sense that something vital is absent, as if you're a spectator to your own existence, rather than the lead actor in a story you're truly writing. Perhaps this internal dissonance has been labeled. Maybe you've tried to frame it as a persistent worry, a form of anxiety. A professional might have listened, perhaps briefly, and offered a diagnosis: depression, an imbalance to be corrected. And so, the remedies appear: a small tablet to start the day, another to ease into night, and with their help, the days slip by. That deep, unsettling feeling becomes muted, a distant echo rather than an urgent alarm. But consider for a moment a different perspective. What if this profound discomfort isn't an error in your system? What if it's not a flaw to be chemically smoothed over, but a profound communication, a signal from the deepest part of your being? Carl Gustav Jung, a foundational figure in the exploration of the human psyche, proposed a radical idea. What we often rush to categorize as mental illness is, in many instances, the psyche's own valiant attempt to heal, to signal a profound misalignment. It's a distress flare indicating that the life you are currently navigating is not nourishing your soul, that the path you're on diverges sharply from your authentic trajectory. You might be caught in a web of routines not of your own choosing, a career that devours your life force, connections that deplete rather than enrich, or chasing aspirations that were subtly implanted by others, not grown from your own core. All the while, your true self, your essence, is crying out for liberation, for expression. But our upbringing rarely includes lessons in deciphering these internal cries. Instead, we are often taught the art of suppression, of adapting, of maintaining a calm surface so as not to cause ripples. And so, a quiet sickness can take root, even as the external world praises your apparent stability and output. This is where Jung's insights offer a different map. For him, the journey towards well-being doesn't lie in avoiding or numbing these difficult feelings, but in courageously turning towards them, in diving into their depths. It's not about silencing the symptom, but about understanding its message. As Jung himself articulated, neurosis is often a stand-in for genuine, necessary suffering. In other words, the unease arises precisely because you are evading the very emotional experiences that are essential for your growth and transformation. As long as this evasion continues, the underlying disquiet will persist, perhaps even intensify. This isn't a message for those seeking fleeting distractions or easy answers. It is for those who have grown weary of the facade, for those who sense they are slowly being submerged, but retain a flicker of conviction that another way must exist. And it does. But it commences with a stark, unwavering decision: to cease the endless running and to begin, truly begin, to listen. To listen to the subtle inflections of your own inner voice, to the symbolic language of your unconscious, to the very pain you've diligently tried to muffle with prescriptions, with compulsive behaviors, with the relentless grind of unfulfilling routines. If these words resonate, you might already sense that the hollowness you experience isn't a mark of personal failing, but rather the consequence of your own absence from the center of your life. And it is profoundly time for that to change. Imagine this. Days, weeks, perhaps even months have been clouded by a pervasive sadness, a lack of vitality. You seek help. A consultation, often brief, ensues. You try to articulate the sleepless nights, the free-floating anxiety, that inexplicable tightness in your chest, the constant nagging sensation of being an outsider in your own life, fundamentally out of sync with your surroundings and your own spirit. A few keywords are noted. A diagnosis is offered. Generalized anxiety, perhaps, or a depressive episode. A prescription follows. And just like that, what was a profound existential cry, a yearning of the soul, is distilled into a biochemical hypothesis, its complexity reduced to a script. What often remains unsaid is that such an approach, while sometimes necessary for acute distress, is fundamentally not oriented towards the nourishment of your soul. Its primary aim is often the restoration of functionality. The underlying logic is pragmatic. You must continue to work, to participate, to produce, to keep the machinery of the everyday turning. Medication can, in many cases, make the unbearable more tolerable, allowing one to persist. And because of this, it's frequently presented, implicitly or explicitly, as the definitive pathway to resolution. But this solution, as Jung perceived, can inadvertently become a snare. He believed that a significant portion of modern psychological distress doesn't originate from an intrinsic defect in brain chemistry alone, but rather from the chasm between the life we are conditioned to lead and the life that our deepest self yearns for. When you consistently disregard your innate calling, your most genuine impulses, your inner truths, the soul begins to manifest its protest. And since it lacks a literal voice, it communicates through the proxies of mind and body, surges of anxiety, debilitating panic, a pervasive sense of hopelessness. Instead of heeding these signals, we are often conditioned to silence them, to neutralize any form of discomfort with external agents, to hasten a return to normalcy. But what constitutes this normalcy? Is it a career path that feels alienating but offers security? Is it a network of superficial connections maintained for appearance's sake? Is it the pursuit of hollow achievements, engagement in robotic routines, and the ever-present feeling that you are merely enduring rather than truly thriving? The anxiety you experience from this Jungian vantage point isn't a malfunction. It's your soul urgently trying to communicate. This existence is not aligned with who you are. You are living in a way that betrays your deepest potential. If this internal voice is ignored for too long, the body and mind may indeed begin to shout their distress more loudly. Yet, the prevailing system is often ready with a new dosage, a revised label, another sedative. The more adept you become at conforming to this model, the further you might drift from your authentic self until a pervasive numbness sets in, a state where neither acute pain nor genuine joy is keenly felt. A condition some might label adulthood. Carl Jung issued a warning. By merely treating the symptom without comprehending its underlying cause, we risk creating an illusion of healing. The individual may appear to function better on the surface, but internally, the sense of being lost, of being disconnected, persists. In the long run, this internal division, this schism between what is deeply felt and what is superficially lived, can lead to an even more profound collapse. There is ultimately no permanent escape from the soul's demands. It will eventually claim its due, whether through burnout, emotional crises, or an unfillable emptiness that no external acquisition or achievement can assuage. This widespread tendency towards medicalizing distress reflects a broader cultural challenge. A society that often struggles to engage with suffering, that fears pain, having largely forgotten its potential transformative power. For Jung, suffering wasn't merely something to be eradicated. It was often the very catalyst for the journey inward, the call towards what he termed individuation, the process of becoming a distinct, whole individual. In contemporary society, however, almost any form of discomfort can be swiftly labeled as pathological. By constantly seeking to evade suffering, we may also be evading the opportunity to become who we are truly meant to be. The lingering question, then, is how many individuals are being muted by interventions that only mask the core issue? How many lives are being spent in a state of artificial equilibrium, their true potential unfulfilled? How many profound personal journeys are being cut short before they have a chance to truly begin? To start unraveling this, we must look beyond the individual and consider the environment that shapes us, the cultural narratives that mold our identities, and the very lifestyles that can become the source of our deepest malaise. Perhaps the issue is never solely with you, but with a world that subtly, or not so subtly, taught you to disconnect from, or even devalue, your true self. Have you ever paused to consider why, in an age of unprecedented material comfort, technological advancement, and apparent freedoms, so many people report feeling emotionally adrift? We have unparalleled access to information, entertainment, and endless stimuli. Yet paradoxically, we may never have been so profoundly disconnected from our own inner lives. The origins of much of modern psychological suffering are not confined solely to the individual mind. They are deeply embedded in the very fabric of the environment that nurtures and shapes us from our earliest moments. Carl Jung perceived this with stark clarity. For him, the problem wasn't merely individual, it was cultural, it was systemic. We inhabit a society that often prioritizes outward appearance while neglecting inner substance, that lauds efficiency and productivity, but often disregards the needs of the soul. From a young age, we are frequently steered along a predefined script. Excel academically, select a secure and respectable career, be relentlessly productive, consume, project an image of happiness for public display, and meticulously conceal any hint of vulnerability or doubt. We are socialized to seek external approval, to compete, to achieve measurable success. But where are the lessons in listening to our intuition, in understanding the nuances of our emotional landscapes, in asking ourselves the fundamental question, what truly gives my life a sense of meaning and purpose? This deficit of meaning is not an accidental byproduct. It can feel almost programmed into the system. We are conditioned to believe that our identity is derived from external markers, the job title we hold, the income we earn, the social validation we receive. Jung recognized this as a perilous trap. When your sense of self-worth is predominantly tethered to external standards, you are perpetually vulnerable to disappointment and a sense of inadequacy. More critically, you become estranged from your own inner nature, from the wisdom of your unconscious, from the core of your soul. And it is in this very estrangement that the feeling of emptiness begins to subtly, insidiously take root. It creeps into your daily routines. You might meet all societal expectations, diligently ticking off items on the prescribed checklist of a successful life, yet still feel a profound sense of being out of place, as if you're living a life designed for someone else. A persistent feeling that something is fundamentally amiss, even if you cannot articulate precisely what it is. What you are experiencing is not a sign of weakness. It is the pain of disconnection. Disconnection from what is authentic, spontaneous, and instinctual within you. According to Jung, this profound disconnection is what fuels our deepest psychological disturbances. Society, in many ways, may not want you to fully awaken to this realization. Disconnected individuals can be more easily managed. They may consume more readily, question less critically, and follow directives with less resistance. They become predictable components within a larger system. And when these individuals inevitably falter, when anxiety, depression, or burnout overwhelm them, the system often responds with palliative measures, with quick fixes, rarely with an invitation to explore the deeper truths of their distress. Jung asserted that for an individual to truly heal, they must confront the very world, the very conditioning that contributed to their wounding. They need to understand the subtle and overt ways they were shaped, what aspects of themselves were suppressed, what vital parts were sacrificed in the pursuit of acceptance or security. This is an arduous and often painful undertaking, for it involves acknowledging that you may have lived a significant portion of your life in a way that wasn't truly your own, that you molded yourself to fit into a confining structure, that you were, in a sense, domesticated by a culture that can be wary of the untamed human spirit. Yet, this confrontation is also the only authentic path towards resolution. Only by recognizing the genesis of your emptiness can you embark on the journey to fill it with something genuine, with truth. And this journey has a name in Jungian psychology: individuation. It is the profound and transformative process that Jung identified as the true pathway to psychological wholeness and healing. There arrives a juncture in many lives when the accumulated pain can no longer be conveniently ignored, when the social persona, the mask worn for the world, becomes unbearably heavy. It's a point where you realize you've been living as a fraction of yourself, or worse, a carefully constructed caricature, far removed from who you genuinely are. It is at this critical breaking point, according to Carl Jung, that the most significant odyssey a human being can undertake often begins: the journey of individuation. But what does it truly mean to individuate? Jung wasn't referring to superficial self-help maxims or minor behavioral adjustments. He described a profound, almost alchemical process wherein the individual gradually ceases to be merely a reflection of the external world, of family expectations, cultural norms, or the desires of others, and begins, with courage and effort, to become what they are in their deepest essence. Individuation is the path towards psychic completeness. It signifies the shift from being primarily what others expect or require you to be, to becoming what your soul, your innermost being, is calling you to embody. This process is rarely linear, nor is it inherently comfortable. On the contrary, it necessitates a courageous willingness to confront all that has been repressed, ignored, or denied within yourself. At this juncture, what Jung termed the personal unconscious begins to reveal its contents. Unresolved past experiences, stifled desires and ambitions, inherited belief systems that have never been critically examined. The journey of individuation commences when you make the conscious decision to stop evading these often shadowed parts of yourself, and instead begin the difficult work of integrating them into a more complete self-understanding. But this is merely the initial phase. Perhaps the most challenging and often the most unsettling aspect of individuation is the encounter with the shadow. This is the part of our psyche that houses all the aspects of ourselves that we have learned to hide, often because they were deemed unacceptable by our families, our culture, or ourselves. It can contain the anger we never dared to express, the envy we pretend not to feel, the impulses that evoke shame, but also, importantly, undeveloped talents and strengths. Jung famously stated, "One does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious." 1. Looking inward means facing your shadow without pretense, without self-justification, without moralistic condemnation. Why is this encounter so vital? Because the shadow, if left unacknowledged and unintegrated, tends to control us from beneath the surface of awareness, projecting itself onto others or erupting in unexpected ways. However, when its contents are brought into consciousness and integrated, the shadow can become an immense source of power, authenticity, and vital energy. A truly authentic life becomes possible only when you cease the internal warfare against aspects of yourself and begin the work of reconciliation with all that you are. Individuation is precisely this, the diligent reconstruction of inner unity, the reconnection with the self, Jung's term for the regulating center of the psyche, the living wholeness that you represent in potential. Herein lies a significant paradox. While the external world often bombards you with messages that you need to improve, to be better, to be more, Jung's perspective suggests that you need to become whole. Not necessarily perfect, but undeniably real. Not about fitting in more seamlessly, but about becoming authentically free. The healing you instinctively seek is not found in becoming a more acceptable version of yourself for the world, but in aligning your inner world with the deepest truth of your being. This path can indeed feel solitary at times. It can be arduous and demanding, but it is also the only journey that offers the possibility of genuine, lasting meaning to your existence. Because when you begin to live from this authentic center, everything shifts. Your choices gain clarity, your relationships transform, even your experience of suffering changes. Suffering ceases to be a meaningless affliction and becomes, instead, an integral part of a profound, ongoing transformation. Yet, an inevitable question arises. Why do so many people seem to live their lives at a considerable distance from this journey? Why do so many remain in a state of psychic anesthesia, repeating unfulfilling patterns, consistently avoiding the confrontation with their own soul? The answer often lies at the heart of modern suffering, the pervasive absence of meaning, a silent epidemic that can corrode from within, affecting even those who, on the surface, appear to have it all. Perhaps your own pain is not merely a problem to be solved, but a symptom of a much deeper truth, that your life, up until this point, may have lacked a clear, personal sense of purpose. But this, crucially, can change. Take a moment to look around, to reflect on the people you know. How many seem to be merely going through the motions, existing rather than truly living? How many follow a prescribed, almost automatic routine, punctuated by superficial commitments, fleeting distractions, and a persistent weariness that no amount of rest seems to alleviate? Carl Jung recognized that this particular brand of suffering was not arbitrary. It was systemic. It was existential. He proposed that a vast portion of the psychological distress experienced by modern individuals stems from a single, stark realization. Life, for many, has lost its inherent sense of meaning. And we are not speaking here of meaning in terms of a grandiose cosmic destiny or an unattainable utopian ideal. We are referring to a deeply personal sense of purpose, an alignment between what one does daily and who one fundamentally is, a life lived in accordance with an internal compass of truth, rather than solely in response to the external pressures of a world that often idolizes superficial success while inadvertently stifling the soul. Jung observed in his clinical practice that the most profound symptoms, persistent anxiety, deep-seated depression, pervasive apathy, gnawing anguish, often began to recede when the individual started to actively construct a life that felt meaningful to them. Not necessarily when they acquired more wealth, or even when symptoms were medicinally suppressed, but when they discovered a why that resonated with their deepest being. Because ultimately, humans can endure almost any hardship if they perceive a reason for their existence, a purpose for their struggles. But without that intrinsic meaning, even the most intense pleasures can feel hollow. Even the most ambitious achievements can ring empty. This is precisely the condition many are grappling with today, an epidemic of inner emptiness. People are not just tired from an overabundance of tasks, but from a profound lack of purpose. Lives can be filled to the brim with obligations and activities, yet feel directionless and poor in genuine significance. Jung understood that human beings possess an innate need to feel part of something larger than their individual egos, a need to sense that their existence carries weight, consequence, and meaning. Without this, an internal collapse can occur. Suffering mutates into disorientation. The soul cries out for a discernible path, but the world often offers only a barrage of distractions, endless scrolling, fleeting entertainment, superficial self-help slogans, productivity hacks, and promises of instant transformation, all attempting to fill a void that can only truly be addressed by authentic self-connection and purpose. The uncomfortable truth is that many are living lives they did not consciously choose. They were subtly or overtly guided into paths that may have pleased others or met societal expectations, but ultimately betrayed their own internal compass. They may have chosen professions that have little connection to their core values, maintained relationships that drain their energy, resided in environments that feel stifling, or repeated daily routines that gradually erase their sense of self. And the body registers this dissonance. The mind falters, the soul contracts. There is no simple remedy for an absence of meaning, because what is missing is not primarily a neurotransmitter, it is direction. It is not merely a dopamine deficit, it is a crisis of identity. This is where Jung's depth psychology becomes particularly urgent and relevant. He wasn't solely interested in helping people to function more effectively within a potentially problematic system. He was passionate about empowering them to live authentically, to find the courage to declare, "This current life is not truly mine, and I refuse to continue living this way." But how does one begin this seemingly monumental task? How does one start to rebuild a sense of meaning when everything in the surrounding environment seems designed to distract from one's essence? Jung offered a clear pointer: the reconnection with the unconscious. For it is there, in the often overlooked and forgotten parts of oneself, that the keys to your unique purpose often reside. Most individuals express a desire for healing, for a resolution to their inner turmoil, yet relatively few are truly willing to engage with the full price of that healing, because, contrary to the simplistic narratives often presented, genuine transformation doesn't typically begin with mere positive affirmations or the superficial adoption of new habits. It commences with a courageous confrontation, a deliberate dive, a descent into the often uncharted depths of one's own soul. And this is precisely the path that Carl Jung illuminated. He taught that there can be no profound healing without a conscious engagement with the unconscious. But what exactly is this unconscious? For Jung, it was far more than a simple dumping ground for repressed memories or past traumas, as earlier theories might have suggested. It was an entire inner universe, vast, dynamic, symbolic, holding all the aspects of ourselves that have been forgotten, denied, or abandoned. Our most authentic impulses, our deepest unacknowledged fears, our most painful unprocessed truths. Everything you may have tried to ignore or push away resides there, awaiting recognition. Why is this so critically important? Because, as Jung clearly articulated, until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate. You might believe you simply have persistent bad luck in relationships, yet unconsciously you may be repeating detrimental patterns learned long ago. You might think you are being consistently sabotaged in your career, but unconsciously, You may harbor a profound fear of true success or visibility. You might feel like a perennial victim of circumstances, but in reality, you may be subtly controlled by old, unhealed traumas that you have never fully confronted. The unconscious in this sense is like an unvarnished mirror. It reflects back to you precisely who you are, not who you wish you were or who you present yourself to be. And that is why engaging with it can be so daunting. It reveals truths that can be painful to accept. It exposes the constructed nature of the masks you've created to navigate the world. It demands that you relinquish the illusion of complete control and embrace the inherent complexity of your inner world. Yet, herein lies the essential paradox. It is precisely within this courageous confrontation that the potential for true healing resides. The more you attempt to deny or suppress the unconscious, the more it tends to dominate your life, often leading to reactive behaviors, impulsivity, and a sense of internal fragmentation. Conversely, the more you are willing to consciously integrate its contents, the more whole, centered, and authentic you become. Jung referred to this transformative journey as the expansion of consciousness, and it can only truly occur when you stop running from yourself and start listening deeply. How does one begin this process of listening? The unconscious does not primarily communicate through linear logic or direct pronouncements. It speaks in a symbolic language, through dreams, through potent images that arise in art or imagination, through bodily sensations, through intuitive hunches, and through emotions that seem to surface from nowhere. But it is not nowhere, it is you. It is the disowned part of you that was relegated to the shadows, patiently waiting for an opportunity to be seen and acknowledged. When you begin to truly listen to this hidden part of yourself, something profound begins to shift. You start to see yourself with greater clarity, to understand the deeper motivations behind your decisions, to embrace your wounds not as shameful secrets, but as sources of wisdom, and, crucially, to reclaim your personal power. As long as you remain unaware of what truly inhabits your inner landscape, you are, in a sense, a hostage to the expectations of others, to the unexamined patterns of the past, to cultural conditioning. But when you courageously dive into the depths of your unconscious, you begin the process of liberation. You come to understand that the anxiety that sometimes paralyzes you is not an enemy to be vanquished, but a messenger carrying vital information. You realize that the sadness that periodically visits you is not a sign of weakness, but an indication that something old within you needs to be acknowledged and perhaps allowed to die, so that something new can be born. This engagement with the unconscious is undeniably demanding. It requires time, patience, depth, and a willingness to abandon the often sought comfort of superficial understanding. But it is also the only path that leads to genuine authenticity. And it is from this wellspring of authenticity that you can begin to rebuild your life, no longer as an unwitting puppet of unconscious forces, but as a conscious co-creator of your own unfolding destiny. Now that you grasp the pivotal role of the unconscious in both your pain and your potential for transformation, one final crucial question must be addressed. What is genuinely preventing you from embarking on this journey? Why do so many people, even when presented with this understanding, remain stuck, paralyzed, living on autopilot, repeating the same unfulfilling cycles in a life devoid of deep personal meaning? The answer, in large part, lies in fear, the fear of profound change, the fear of inevitable loss that comes with growth, the fear of abandoning all that is familiar, even if that familiarity is destructive for an unknown future. There inevitably comes a moment when you are faced with a choice, not just any ordinary everyday choice, but the choice. The one that draws a line between who you currently are and who you were merely conditioned to be. The choice that will ultimately define whether you continue to live a borrowed, anesthetized, and fundamentally empty existence, or if you will finally commit to the most profound and serious promise anyone can make, the commitment to your own soul. If you have journeyed this far through these reflections, it is unlikely to be a mere coincidence. Something within you is stirring, awakening. It may still be a subtle whisper, easily dismissed, or it may already be a persistent, undeniable cry. But it is there. And this internal call, this yearning from the deepest, most honest, most alive part of who you are, will not simply vanish if ignored. It emanates from the core of your being, the part that instinctively refuses to accept that life is merely a sequence of work, obligations, fleeting distractions, and basic survival. It is the part of you that knows, even without being able to fully articulate it, that there is something more, something profound, something uniquely yours, waiting to be discovered and lived. But this something more will only reveal itself if you have the courage to turn inward and walk towards yourself, towards your own truth. Carl Jung observed that the greatest privilege afforded to a human being is to become who they truly are. Yet, he also recognized that this is often the most avoided path, precisely because it demands that you relinquish much of what is comfortable, predictable, and superficial. It requires you to face your deepest-seated fears, to courageously confront your own shadows, and to critically question everything you were once taught to accept as unassailable truth. But that is precisely why this path is so sacred, so transformative, because it genuinely heals, because it leads to wholeness. The majority of people may indeed continue on autopilot. They may opt for the perceived safety of numbness over the challenging clarity of self-awareness. They may continue to accumulate possessions, distractions, and superficial validation, while, on a deeper level, an inner decay, a quiet desperation, takes hold. But you do not have to be another statistic in that story. You possess the agency to choose differently. You can choose to stop squandering your precious existence. You can choose to emerge from the psychic anesthesia. You can choose, day by day, to build a life that resonates with meaning, a life that is authentically, uniquely yours. No one will tell you this will be an easy path. It won't. There will be moments of pain, confusion, and necessary endings as old patterns and unsuitable connections fall away. But alongside the difficulty, there will be an unparalleled sense of liberation. And there is arguably nothing more potent, more alive, than an awakened soul. Because when you begin to live in accordance with who you truly are, you become increasingly unshakable. You cease to constantly seek external permission for your choices. You stop the debilitating habit of comparing yourself to others. You no longer lose yourself in futile attempts to please those who may never truly understand or support your authentic journey. So now I invite you to consider, what do you truly need to let go of in order to begin genuinely living? What is the comforting lie you are still telling yourself, the one that keeps you tethered to a life that no longer serves your soul? The simple act of acknowledging this, even to yourself, can be a profound step out of the numbness. It is a gesture of presence, of conscious choice, of nascent awakening. If these words have moved something within you, if some part of this message has touched a hidden wound or ignited a dormant spark, then perhaps you are indeed ready to go even deeper. And now, more than ever, is the time to continue that essential, life-giving exploration. Thanks for watching. If this resonated, please like this video and subscribe to stay updated. I look forward to continuing this journey with you. Until next time, take care and be present.